The Sunday afternoon rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dominic Caruso's penthouse in Tribeca, each drop a tiny fist demanding entry into a space that had been silent for too long. He stood in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his associate Carlo explain why the shipment from Newark was delayed again. "I don't care about the weather, Carlo. I care about results." "Fix it." He ended the call and rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion that had become his constant companion over the past 2 years. 2 years since Maria died. 2 years since his world had fractured into before and after. "Daddy?" The small voice made him turn. Isabelle stood in the doorway of his office, her dark curls tangled from sleep, wearing the pink pajamas with unicorns that she refused to outgrow. At 5 years old, she looked so much like Maria, it physically hurt to look at her sometimes. "Piccola, what are you doing awake? It's barely 7. "I had a bad dream." Her bottom lip trembled. "About Mommy." Dominic's chest constricted. He crossed the room and swept her into his arms, carrying her to the leather couch that faced the rain-streaked windows. "Tell me about it." I couldn't remember her voice anymore. Isabelle's small hands fisted in his shirt. "In the dream, she was reading to me, but I couldn't hear the words. Just silence." The fear in her voice mirrored his own terror. That someday the sound of Maria's laugh, the cadence of her voice, the particular way she said their daughter's name would fade into nothing. "We have videos," Dominic said gently. "We can watch them anytime you want." "It's not the same." Isabelle pulled back to look at him with those ancient eyes that no 5-year-old should possess. "Videos are flat. I want real." Real. The one thing he couldn't give her. The doorbell chimed, unexpected and jarring. Dominic glanced at his watch. 7:15 on a Sunday morning. No one should be at his door. Marco, his head of security, appeared in the hallway. "Boss, there's a woman here. Says she's from the nanny agency. Claims she has a 7:30 appointment." Dominic's jaw tightened. He'd forgotten. His assistant had scheduled interviews for a new nanny after the last one had quit, citing incompatibility with the position's demands. Which meant Isabelle had refused to speak to her for 3 weeks straight. "Send her away. Reschedule for a reasonable hour." "Actually," Marco said carefully, "she's early because she brought books. Says she wanted time to prepare before meeting Isabelle. She's set up a whole reading area in your living room." Dominic stood, settling Isabelle on his hip despite her protests that she was too big to be carried. What kind of person shows up 90 minutes early to a job interview? "The desperate kind," Marco offered, "or the crazy kind. Let's find out which." CTA Narration. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The woman in his living room was not what Dominic expected. She was young, late 20s maybe, with straight black hair pulled into a practical ponytail and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She wore jeans and a navy cardigan that had seen better days, and she was currently on her hands and knees arranging picture books in a semicircle on his Italian marble floor. She looked up when he entered, and her eyes, dark brown and unexpectedly warm, widened slightly. "Mr. Caruso, I'm so sorry for arriving early. I know it's unprofessional, but I wanted—" She gestured helplessly at the books. "I wanted to be ready." "Ready for what exactly?" "To meet Isabelle." She stood, brushing off her knees, and extended her hand. "I'm Sophie Chen. The agency sent me." Her grip was firm, her palm slightly calloused. Working hands. Honest hands. Isabelle had gone rigid against Dominic's chest, her face buried in his neck. She always did this with new people. Shut down completely. "Isabelle," Dominic said gently, "this is Miss Chen. She came to meet you." No response. Sophie Chen didn't push. Instead, She sat down on the floor beside her carefully arranged books and picked one up. You know, I brought 12 books with me this morning. Want to know why 12? Silence from Isabelle. Because 12 is my lucky number. My grandmother always said good things come in dozens. Eggs, donuts, books. Sophie opened the book. Dominic recognized it immediately as Where the Wild Things Are, and began to read. Not to Isabelle specifically, not performing or projecting, just reading aloud in a voice that was warm and measured and somehow completely natural. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. Dominic felt Isabelle shift against him, not pulling away, but turning her head slightly. Listening. Sophie continued reading, giving each wild thing a distinct voice. The one with horns got a deep, lonely rumble. The one with the terrible claws spoke in a high, anxious pitch. The one with the terrible teeth had a growly warmth that made it seem less frightening than protective. By the time Max returned home to find his supper waiting, still hot, Isabelle had turned completely in Dominic's arms. Her dark eyes were fixed on Sophie with an intensity that made Dominic's chest ache. Sophie closed the book gently and set it aside. That's one of my favorites. My mom used to read it to me every Thursday night before bed. Mommy read that one, Isabelle whispered. It was the first time she'd spoken about Maria voluntarily in months. Sophie's expression softened. Did she? Then she had excellent taste in books. She did all the voices different. Isabelle's grip on Dominic's shirt loosened slightly. Each wild thing was special. That's exactly how it should be. Every wild thing deserves their own voice. Sophie picked up another book. What? About this one? Do you know The Giving Tree? Isabelle nodded slowly. Mommy said it was sad but important. Your mommy was very wise. The conversation continued like that for 20 minutes. Sophie reading passages, Isabelle offering small comments, Dominic standing frozen in his own living room, watching his daughter engage with another human being for the first time in 2 years. Eventually, Isabelle wiggled to be put down. Dominic set her on her feet, and she moved closer to Sophie's circle of books, sitting just outside the boundary. Can I ask you something? Isabelle's voice was barely audible. Of course. Why did you come so early? Sophie adjusted her glasses, considering the question seriously. Because I know what it's like to lose someone who made stories magical. When my mom died, I was 8. She used to read to me every single night. After she was gone, I couldn't touch books for almost a year because they reminded me too much of her. Dominic's heart stopped. This woman understood. But then my grandmother, my mom's mother, she started reading to me. And you know what I discovered? What? Isabelle leaned forward slightly. That stories don't belong to just one person. They're meant to be shared. My mom's way of reading was special and irreplaceable, but that didn't mean I couldn't find new ways to love the same stories. Sophie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Your mommy's voice was unique. No one will ever read exactly like her. But that doesn't mean stories have to hurt forever. Isabelle was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and picked up Guess How Much I Love You. This was Mommy's favorite to read before bed. It's a beautiful book. Can you read it? The question came out small and scared. So I can see if it's different? Sophie glanced at Dominic, asking permission with her eyes. He nodded, not trusting his voice. She opened the book and began to read about little nut brown hare and big nut brown hare trying to measure their love. Her voice was gentle but not saccharine, emotional but not manipulative. When she got to the end, when big nut brown hare whispered, I love you right up to the moon, and back, Isabelle's eyes filled with tears. Mommy used to say that every night. It's a perfect thing to say, Sophie agreed softly. Daddy says it now, but it sounds different. Dominic felt like he'd been punched. He'd been trying so hard to maintain Maria's rituals, to fill the impossible void she'd left, and all he'd done was remind Isabelle of what was missing. Different isn't bad, Sophie said. It's just different. Your daddy loves you the same amount, right up to the moon and back. It just sounds like him instead of your mommy. Both are real. Isabelle absorbed this, her small face serious. Then she stood and returned to Dominic, reaching up for him. He lifted her immediately. Can Miss Chen come back? Isabelle asked. That depends on Miss Chen, Dominic said, looking at Sophie over his daughter's head. Sophie stood, gathering her books with efficient movements. I'd like that very much, if your daddy thinks it's a good idea. We need to discuss terms, Dominic said. Isabelle, why don't you go pick out clothes for today? Something comfortable. Okay, Daddy. Isabelle kissed his cheek and scampered off toward her bedroom. When she was gone, Dominic gestured for Sophie to sit on the couch. He took the chair across from her, maintaining professional distance even as every instinct screamed to close the space. That was remarkable, he said simply. She's remarkable. Grief at that age is complicated. You mentioned losing your mother. I'm sorry. Sophie's smile was sad. It was a long time ago. But some losses stay with you. She paused. The agency probably told you I have a master's in child development with a focus on grief counseling. They did. They also told me you've been rejected by 3 families in the past month. Her cheeks flushed. I tend to be too honest. Rich people don't always like being told their parenting approaches are damaging their children. Despite everything, Dominic felt his lips twitch. I can imagine. I should be clear about something, Mr. Caruso. Sophie met his eyes directly. I looked you up before I came here. I know what people say you do. I know your wife died in a car accident that some sources suggest wasn't an accident at all. Dominic's entire body went cold. And yet you're here. I'm here because Isabelle needs help, and because I don't believe children should suffer for their parents' choices, whatever those choices might be. The directness should have offended him. Instead, it felt like relief. I need someone who can be here 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., some weekends if I travel for business. He named a salary that made her eyes widen. In exchange, I expect complete discretion, absolute loyalty, and for you to treat my daughter like she's the most important person in the world. She already is, Sophie said simply. I could tell that the moment you walked in carrying her. The position comes with risks, not physical, he added quickly when her expression changed, but emotional. Isabelle's grief is deep. She'll push you away and pull you close sometimes in the same breath. It's exhausting. Grief usually is. There's one more thing. Dominic leaned forward, reading to her. Stories. It's important. Her mother used to read every single day. Multiple books. It was their ritual. I gathered that from the collection in her room. I saw the bookshelf when I passed by. Dominic's jaw tightened. Maria color-coded them. By genre and then by emotional tone. Happy books for hard days. Brave books for scared nights. Love books for bedtime. That's beautiful. Isabelle can't look at them anymore. Hasn't touched that shelf in 2 years. But she remembers. God, she remembers everything. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I can't replace her mother, Mr. Caruso. I won't try. I'm not asking you to replace her. I'm asking you to help Isabelle find her way back to something Maria loved. To stories. Then yes, I'll take the position. Relief flooded through him. When can you start? Tomorrow? Today, he countered. Stay for the day. See how it goes. If either of you decides it's not working, we'll call it a trial run. Sophie glanced down at her jeans and worn cardigan. I'm not exactly dressed for professional childcare. Isabelle's 5. She doesn't care about professional attire. Dominic stood. Stay, please. Something in his voice must have convinced her because she nodded. The rest of the day unfolded with surprising ease. Sophie read 4 more books to Isabelle before lunch. They made grilled cheese sandwiches together in the kitchen, Isabelle chattering about her favorite foods, while Sophie listened with complete attention. Dominic worked in his office but found himself migrating toward wherever their voices carried. He watched Sophie teach Isabelle how to make a blanket fort in the living room, observed her patiently help his daughter sound out words in a simple reader. By evening, Isabelle had fallen asleep on the couch, her head in Sophie's lap, one hand clutching Where the Wild Things Are. Sophie looked up when Dominic entered. She crashed hard. I think all the emotional processing wore her out. She seems peaceful. She's extraordinary. You've done an amazing job with her. The compliment settled warm in his chest. I've been terrified I'm failing her every single day. That's how you know you're a good parent. The ones who think they're perfect are usually the problem. Dominic moved to lift Isabelle, but Sophie shook her head. Give her another minute. She was just starting to really relax. So Dominic sat in the chair across from them and watched his daughter sleep. Watched this stranger who somehow wasn't a stranger anymore gently stroke Isabelle's hair. Why did you really come early? He asked quietly. Sophie was silent for a moment. Then, because the agency told me about your wife, about how she died, and I thought, if I were a little girl who'd lost her mother, I'd need someone to be early, to show up before I expected them, to prove they were serious about staying. The answer gutted him. They sat in comfortable silence until Isabelle stirred. She blinked up at Sophie, momentarily disoriented, then smiled. You stayed. I stayed, and I'll be back tomorrow if you want me to. I want you to. Isabelle sat up, rubbing her eyes. Then she looked at her father. Daddy, can Miss Chen read me my bedtime story tonight? Dominic's throat tightened. Isabelle hadn't asked for a bedtime story in 2 years. He'd tried, countless times, but she always refused. If Miss Chen doesn't mind staying a bit longer. I don't mind at all, Sophie said softly. An hour later, after dinner and bath time, Dominic stood in the doorway of Isabelle's bedroom watching Sophie settle into the rocking chair that Maria used to occupy. Isabelle was already in bed, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. What story would you like tonight? Sophie asked. Guess how much I love you, Isabelle whispered. The one from this morning. Sophie opened the book and began to read. Dominic leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, listening to her gentle voice fill the space that had been silent for so long. When she reached the ending, when big nut-brown hair whispered his love all the way to the moon and back, Isabelle's eyes were already drifting closed. Sophie set the book aside and stood carefully. She was almost to the door when Isabelle's small voice stopped her. Miss Chen? Yes, sweetheart? You read good. Different than Mommy, but still good. Sophie smiled. That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time. She stepped into the hallway and Dominic pulled the door mostly closed, leaving it cracked the way Isabelle liked. They walked toward the living room in silence. At the elevator that would take Sophie down to the lobby, Dominic stopped. Thank you. For today. For all of it. You don't need to thank me. This is what I do. No, Dominic said firmly. What you did today went beyond a job. You saw my daughter. Really saw her. Sophie's smile was sad. She's not hard to see. She's right there, hurting and hoping someone will notice. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. Sophie stepped inside, then turned to face him. I'll be here at 8 tomorrow. We can discuss schedule details then. Sophie. He stopped her before the doors could close. Why are you really doing this? You could work somewhere safer. Somewhere with a normal family and normal problems. She considered the question seriously. Because normal families usually don't need me. The messy ones do. The broken ones. the ones trying to piece themselves back together after loss. Her dark eyes held his. I can't save everyone, but maybe I can help one little girl remember that stories don't have to hurt forever. The elevator doors closed. Dominic stood in his silent penthouse, listening to the rain that had started again, feeling something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe, or the terrifying possibility of it. He checked his watch. 8:30. Marco would be waiting for his evening briefing about the Newark situation, the territorial dispute with the Bianchi family, the dozen other fires that constantly needed putting out. But first, he returned to Isabelle's room. She was still awake, staring at the ceiling with that solemn expression she wore when processing something important. Can't sleep, Piccola? Daddy? She sat up slightly. Can I tell you something? Always. He sat on the edge of her bed, and Isabelle scooted closer. Her small hand found his, fingers lacing together. Miss Chen reads stories like Mommy did, she whispered. Dominic's heart stopped, completely stopped. The room spun, his vision tunneled. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what his daughter had just said. Like Mommy did. Not the same, not replacing, but like her. Similar enough that Isabelle had found comfort instead of pain. Daddy, are you okay? He realized he'd gone completely still, his hand frozen in Isabelle's grasp. With enormous effort, he forced himself to breathe. I'm okay, Piccola. His voice cracked. That's a big thing to say. But it's true. Isabelle's eyes were wide and honest. Different voices, different rhythm, but the same love in it. Like Mommy always had love in the stories. Tears burned behind Dominic's eyes. He pulled Isabelle against his chest, holding her while his world realigned itself around this impossible, terrifying, beautiful revelation. His daughter had just given him permission to let someone else into the sacred space Maria had left empty. I'm glad, he managed. I'm so glad you feel that way. Can she come back tomorrow? She'll be here at 8. Good. Isabelle yawned, settling back into her pillows. I like her, Daddy. She sees me. The phrase echoed Sophie's words from earlier. She's right there, hurting and hoping someone will notice. Dominic tucked the blanket around his daughter, kissed her forehead, and whispered, I love you right up to the moon. And back. And back, Isabelle murmured, already drifting to sleep. In the hallway, Dominic leaned against the wall, his heart still racing from those whispered words. She reads stories like Mommy did. His daughter had just handed him a gift he didn't know he needed. Permission to move forward without moving away from Maria's memory. And Sophie Chen, the woman with honest hands and sad eyes who understood grief, had made it possible. Dominic pulled out his phone and called Marco. Boss? Background check on Sophie Chen. Complete workup. I want to know everything. Already running it. Should have full results by morning. Good. And Marco? Yeah. Increase security on Isabelle. Effective immediately. If Sophie Chen is going to be part of our lives, I need to make sure both of them are protected. Because Dominic Caruso had just learned something terrifying. He was going to let this woman into his daughter's life, into their home, into the space where Maria's ghost still lived. And if anything happened to Sophie Chen, if the dangers of his world touched her, Isabelle would break, which meant Sophie had just become the most valuable and vulnerable person in his life, second only to his daughter. And in Dominic's world, that made her a target. Sophie arrived at exactly 8 a.m. the next morning, carrying a canvas bag stuffed with books and what looked like art supplies. Marco met her at the private elevator, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes assessing every detail. Miss Chen, Mr. Caruso is expecting you. Thank you, Marco. The ride up felt different than yesterday. Yesterday, she'd been a nervous candidate hoping to make a good impression. Today, she was walking into something more complicated. A grieving household, a dangerous man's inner sanctum, a little girl's fragile hope. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. Dominic stood waiting in the foyer, dressed in dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Good morning," Sophie said, adjusting the bag on her shoulder. "Morning. Isabelle's been awake since 6 asking when you'd arrive." Something flickered in his expression, gratitude mixed with apprehension. "She's in the kitchen attempting to make breakfast." "Attempting?" "She has very ambitious ideas about pancakes and very little understanding of measurements." Sophie smiled. "Want me to rescue the situation?" "Please." She found Isabelle standing on a step stool at the massive marble island, flour coating her hands, her pajamas, and a significant portion of the counter. A mixing bowl contained what looked like paste. "Miss Chen," Isabelle's face lit up, "I'm making pancakes for you." "I can see that. This is very sweet of you." Sophie set her bag down and surveyed the damage. "Have you made pancakes before?" "Mommy used to let me help." Isabelle's voice dropped. "But I can't remember the recipe." "That's okay. We can figure it out together." Sophie washed her hands at the sink. "First rule of cooking: measurements matter. Second rule: pancakes are supposed to be lumpy batter, not smooth paste." "Really?" "Really. Here, let me show you." They worked side by side, Sophie gently correcting Isabelle's enthusiastic additions of ingredients, teaching her how to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. Dominic appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching with an expression Sophie couldn't quite read. "Daddy, look, I'm making real pancakes." "I see that, Piccola. Very impressive." By the time they sat down to eat, Isabelle had flour in her hair and syrup on her nose, but she'd successfully helped create a stack of reasonably edible pancakes. "These are good," Dominic said, and he sounded genuinely surprised. "Miss Chen is a good teacher." Isabelle took a huge bite. "Can we read after breakfast?" "We can do whatever you want today. That's the plan." After breakfast and cleanup, during which Isabelle insisted on helping wash every dish, they settled in the living room. Sophie had brought a selection of books, but Isabelle made a beeline for the ones they'd read yesterday. "Can we read Where the Wild Things Are again?" "Of course. You can read your favorite books as many times as you want." Mommy said that too. Isabelle settled onto the couch, patting the spot beside her. "She said good stories get better every time." Sophie sat, acutely aware of Dominic watching from the dining room where he'd set up his laptop. He was supposed to be working, but his attention kept drifting their way. She read the book, giving each wild thing their voices from yesterday. Isabelle mouthed along with some of the words, clearly, having memorized portions. When they finished, Isabelle was quiet for a moment. Then, "Miss Chen, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When your mommy died, did you forget things about her?" Sophie's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes. Little things at first. Like exactly how she laughed or the way she hummed when she cooked." "Did it make you sad?" "Very sad. But then my grandmother told me something important." Sophie set the book aside. "She said that forgetting small details doesn't mean you're losing the person. It means your brain is making room for new memories while keeping the important things safe." "What are the important things?" "How they made you feel. The love they had for you. The way they saw the world." Sophie touched Isabelle's hand gently. "You might forget exactly how your mommy's voice sounded reading this book. But you'll never forget that she made you feel safe and loved during story time." Isabelle absorbed this, her small face serious. "I don't want to forget her." "You won't. Not the parts that matter." From across the room, Sophie heard Dominic's sharp intake of breath. When she glanced over, he was staring at his laptop screen, but his jaw was tight with emotion. The morning passed with more books, a drawing session where Isabelle illustrated her favorite wild thing, and a dance party to songs from a playlist that Dominic admitted Maria had created. She loved music, he said quietly while Isabelle twirled around the living room. Always had something playing. The apartment was never silent when she was alive. It doesn't have to be silent now, Sophie said. Something shifted in his expression. No, I suppose it doesn't. Around 1, Isabelle started to fade. The emotional intensity of the morning combined with poor sleep the night before caught up with her. I'm not tired, she insisted, even as she yawned. How about quiet time? Sophie suggested. We can read in your room. Sometimes stories are better when you're cozy in bed. Isabelle considered this. Okay, but not a nap. Just quiet time. Sophie gathered a few books and followed Isabelle to her bedroom. It was beautiful, decorated in soft purples and whites, with the massive bookshelf Dominic had mentioned taking up one entire wall. The books were still arranged exactly as Maria had left them. Color-coded, organized by theme and emotional tone, happy books in yellows and oranges, brave books in reds and blues, love books in pinks and purples. Isabelle hadn't looked directly at the shelf since they entered the room. Those are Mommy's books, she whispered. They're beautiful. She organized them so carefully. I can't touch them. Sophie understood immediately. The bookshelf wasn't just a collection, it was a shrine, the last tangible piece of Maria's presence in this room. You don't have to touch them, Sophie said gently. Not until you're ready. What if I'm never ready? Then they'll stay exactly where they are. There's no timeline for grief, Isabelle. They climbed onto Isabelle's bed, and Sophie read, Guess How Much I Love You, in a quiet voice. By the third page, Isabelle's eyes were drifting closed. Miss Chen? She murmured. Yes, sweetie? Will you be here when I wake up? The question broke Sophie's heart. I'll be here. Promise? I promise. Isabelle fell asleep holding Sophie's hand. Sophie carefully extracted herself and returned to the living room to find Dominic standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. His tone was harsh, commanding. This was the other man, the dangerous one. He ended the call when he heard her approach. She's asleep? Out cold. The emotional processing exhausts her. She slept through the night for the first time in a week. Dominic turned to face her fully. Because of you. Because she felt safe enough to let go. Same thing. He moved to the bar cart and poured 2 fingers of whiskey despite it being barely past 1 in the afternoon. Drink? I'm working. Consider it medicinal. You've earned it. Sophie accepted the glass. The whiskey burned going down, but it was good quality. Everything in this penthouse was good quality. I had my people run your background, Dominic said without preamble. Sophie's spine straightened. I assumed you would. Sophie Chen, age 27, master's degree in child development from Columbia, specialized in grief counseling for children. Mother died when you were 8, cancer. Father remarried when you were 10. You didn't get along with your stepmother. That's an understatement. You moved in with your maternal grandmother at 12. Stayed until she died when you were 23. Dominic sipped his whiskey. You've worked for 4 families in the past 3 years. Each one let you go despite glowing references. I told you. I'm too honest about their terrible parenting. The Westchester family. You reported them to child services for emotional abuse. Sophie met his eyes directly. The mother was telling her 6-year-old daughter that she was fat, putting her on diets, weighing her daily. That child developed an eating disorder. I reported it because it was the right thing to do. You lost your job. I kept my conscience. Something that might have been respect flickered across Dominic's face. The Upper East Side family. You quit after 2 months. They wanted me to raise their children while they pretended to be childless at parties. I'm not interested in being invisible help. And the Brooklyn family? Sophie's jaw tightened. The father had anger issues. broke things when he was upset. Never hit the kids, but the threat was always there. I told the mother she needed to choose between her marriage and her children's mental health. She chose the marriage. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. You're going to be a problem. Excuse me? You're honest. You have principles. You don't back down. He finished his whiskey. In my world, those qualities usually get people hurt. Then maybe you should reconsider hiring me. No. The word was firm. I need exactly those qualities around my daughter. Someone who will protect her even if it means standing up to me. The admission surprised her. You want someone who will challenge you? I want someone who'll put Isabelle first. Always. Even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Dominic set his glass down. My world is complicated, Sophie. Dangerous. The less you know about the details, the safer you'll be. But I need to know that if something happens to me, there's someone who'll fight for my daughter. The weight of what he was asking settled over her. You're not just hiring a nanny. No. I'm hiring someone I can trust with the most important person in my life. His brown eyes were intense. Can you handle that? Sophie thought about Isabelle asleep upstairs, clutching her stuffed rabbit. About the little girl who whispered fears about forgetting her mother. About the bookshelf she couldn't touch, and the stories that hurt too much to hear. Yes, she said. I can handle that. Dominic nodded once. Then we should discuss practicalities. You'll need a room here. The commute from Queens is impractical for the hours I need. Mr. Caruso. Dominic. Please. Dominic. I can't just move in. I have an apartment. A life. Which you can maintain. But Isabelle needs consistency. Especially now when she's starting to open up. He pulled out his phone. There's a guest suite on the 3rd floor. Private entrance, full bathroom, enough space for your things. You can go home on weekends if you want, but weekdays you're here. That's not a normal nanny arrangement. Nothing about this situation is normal. Dominic's voice softened. I'm asking a lot. I know that. The compensation will reflect it. He named a figure that made Sophie's eyes widen. It was more than she'd made in the past 2 years combined. That's excessive. That's what my daughter's well-being is worth to me. Sophie wanted to argue, wanted to maintain boundaries and professional distance, but she thought about Isabelle waking up and asking if she'd still be there, about the fear of abandonment that lived behind those ancient eyes. I'll need to give notice on my apartment. Pack my things. Take tomorrow. Marco will help you move on Wednesday. Dominic pulled out a black credit card. Anything you need for Isabelle, books, art supplies, educational materials, use this. No limit. I can't. You can and you will. Consider it a work expense. He pressed the card into her hand. I trust your judgment. Buy whatever you think will help her. The card was heavy in her palm, physical proof that this was real. That she was stepping into a life completely different from anything she'd known. CTA number 2. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. A sound from upstairs made them both turn. Isabelle appeared at the top of the staircase, rubbing her eyes. Miss Chen, you're still here. I promised, didn't I? Isabelle's smile was pure sunshine. Can we read more books? As many as you want. The afternoon passed in a blur of stories and snacks, and Isabelle's infectious laughter as Sophie did increasingly ridiculous voices for different characters. Dominic worked at the dining room table, but Sophie noticed his attention constantly drifting their way. Around 5, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. I need to take this. Sophie, can you handle dinner? Of course. He disappeared into his office, and Sophie heard his voice rise in sharp Italian through the closed door. Whatever the call was about, it wasn't good. She distracted Isabelle with cooking, letting her help make pasta from scratch. They were laughing over Isabelle's flour-covered nose when Dominic emerged an hour later looking exhausted. "Daddy, look what we made!" "It's beautiful, Piccola." But his smile didn't reach his eyes. They ate together, Isabelle chattering about her day while Dominic gave appropriate responses. But Sophie could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw kept clenching. After dinner, after Isabelle's bath and pajamas, Sophie settled into the rocking chair in Isabelle's room for bedtime stories. "Can we read the love books tonight?" Isabelle asked. "Which ones are the love books?" Isabelle pointed to the bookshelf, the pink and purple section that Maria had organized. "Are you sure? You said you couldn't touch Mommy's books." "I can't touch them. But maybe you can?" Sophie's throat tightened. "Which one would you like?" "The one with the rabbits." "Second shelf. Third from the left." Sophie found the book exactly where Isabelle directed. "Guess How Much I Love You." That was Mommy's favorite. Then it's the perfect choice. She read slowly, savoring each page. When she got to the ending, she whispered the final line the way Isabelle's mother must have whispered it. "I love you right up to the moon, and back." "And back," Isabelle echoed sleepily. Sophie tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and turned to leave. "Miss Chen?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad you're here." "Me too, Isabelle. Me too." In the hallway, Sophie found Dominic leaning against the wall, his expression raw. "You got her to choose a book from Maria's collection." "She chose it. I just retrieved it." "No one's touched those books in 2 years. I tried once, and she had a complete meltdown." He ran a hand through his hair. "How did you know she'd be ready?" "I didn't. But I trusted her to know her own boundaries." Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then, "There's something you need to know. About the phone call earlier." Sophie's stomach tightened. "Okay. I have enemies. People who would hurt me by hurting the people I care about." His eyes met hers. "You're about to become one of those people. By association with Isabelle, you're a potential target. I gathered your life wasn't simple." "This is more than complicated, Sophie. This is dangerous." He stepped closer. "I'm increasing security. You'll have a driver, a detail when you leave the building. It's not negotiable." "You're serious?" "Completely. And if you want to walk away now, I understand. But if you stay, you need to understand the risks." Sophie thought about Isabelle asleep upstairs, about the trust in her eyes when she'd asked Sophie to get a book from her mother's collection, about the whispered words that had stopped Dominic's heart. "I'm staying." Even knowing the danger? Especially knowing the danger. Because Isabelle needs someone who won't leave when things get hard. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Gratitude mixed with something else, something that made Sophie's pulse quicken. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For all of it." "You don't have to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do. Because what you're doing for my daughter—" His voice cracked. "It's giving her back pieces of herself I thought were lost forever." They stood in the hallway, the space between them charged with unspoken things. Then Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and swore in Italian. "I have to go. Business that can't wait." He looked at her. "Will you stay until I get back? I don't like leaving Isabelle with just security." "Of course. How long will you be?" "Few hours, maybe more." He was already moving toward his office to grab his jacket. "Marco will be here, and Sophie?" "Yes." "Lock the doors after I leave. Don't open them for anyone except me." Then he was gone, leaving Sophie alone in the too quiet penthouse with a sleeping child and warnings about danger she didn't fully understand. She checked on Isabelle, still peacefully asleep, then returned to the living room. Marco appeared like a ghost. "Miss Chen, Mr. Caruso asked me to brief you on security protocols. For the next hour, Marco explained the building's security system, the panic buttons in every room, the safe room behind a false wall in Dominic's office. He showed her which numbers to call in an emergency, how to contact him directly, what to do if someone unauthorized tried to enter. You're scaring me, Sophie admitted. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Marco's expression was kind beneath the professional exterior. Mr. Caruso doesn't bring people into his personal life often. The fact that he's trusting you with Isabelle means he believes you're worth protecting. Or that I'm a liability. Both can be true. After Marco left, Sophie sat in the living room with a book she couldn't focus on, listening to the city sounds 40 floors below. Somewhere out there, Dominic was handling business that required him to leave at night with that hard expression. She told herself it wasn't her concern, that his world and hers only overlapped in the space where Isabelle lived. But when the elevator chimed at 11 and Dominic stepped out, his knuckles bruised and his expression darker than she'd ever seen it, Sophie found herself on her feet. Are you hurt? He looked surprised to see her still awake. I'm fine. Your hands say otherwise. Dominic glanced down at his knuckles like he'd forgotten about them. It's nothing. Let me clean them at least. Sophie, please. I won't sleep knowing you're bleeding somewhere in this apartment. He relented, following her to the kitchen. She found a first aid kit under the sink and gestured for him to sit at the island. His hands were warm when she took them, turning them palm up to assess the damage. The knuckles were split, bruising already forming. This is going to sting, she warned before applying antiseptic. He didn't flinch, just watched her face while she worked. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I know. Most people would ask what happened. Most people aren't trying to maintain professional boundaries with their employer. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Is that what we're doing? Maintaining professional boundaries? Trying to. Sophie wrapped his knuckles in gauze. I'm not sure it's working. No, Dominic agreed. I don't think it is. She finished bandaging his other hand and started to pull away, but his fingers caught hers. Thank you. For staying. For this. He gestured with his bandaged hand. For everything. You need to stop thanking me. I can't seem to help it. They were close now. Closer than professionalism allowed. Sophie could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. I should go, she whispered. You should. Neither of them moved. Then Dominic's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled away, checking the message with a frown. Security flagged something. Probably nothing, but I need to check. He stood. Get some sleep, Sophie. Tomorrow will be busy. She watched him disappear toward his office, her heart still racing from the almost moment in the kitchen. This was a mistake. Getting tangled up with Dominic Caruso, with his dangerous life and his grief, and his daughter who needed her. But as Sophie made her way to the guest room Dominic had offered, as she lay in a bed that cost more than her entire apartment's furniture, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Somewhere in this penthouse, Isabelle slept peacefully for the first time in years, and Dominic Caruso was fighting battles Sophie couldn't see to keep that peace intact. She was in the center of something complicated and dangerous, and walking away was no longer an option. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both natural and surreal. Sophie moved into the guest suite on a rainy Wednesday, Marco helping carry her modest belongings up the private elevator, while Isabelle bounced around excitedly, claiming she'd helped pick out the flowers in the vase on the dresser. Daddy said you needed to feel welcome, Isabelle explained seriously. So I picked the yellow ones. Yellow means happiness. They're perfect, Sophie said, throat tight. The suite was larger than her entire queen's apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson River. A king bed with sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. a bathroom with heated marble floors and a soaking tub. "This is too much," she'd told Dominic that first night. "It's what's available," he'd replied. And Isabelle wanted you on the same floor as her room. Which was true. Isabelle's room was just down the hall, close enough that Sophie could hear if she called out in the night. She did, that first week. 3 times, nightmares about her mother. Sophie would pad down the hallway in her pajamas and climb into Isabelle's bed, reading softly until the little girl fell back asleep. The third time it happened, Sophie emerged from Isabelle's room at 2 a.m. to find Dominic standing in the hallway, rumpled from sleep, his expression raw with gratitude. "I heard her cry out," he said quietly. "I was coming to check. I've got her. Go back to sleep." "You shouldn't have to." "Yes, I should. That's why I'm here." Something shifted in his expression. Then he nodded and disappeared back into his room. But Sophie noticed he started leaving his door cracked after that. Listening. Always listening for his daughter. The days fell into a pattern. Breakfast together. All 3 of them when Dominic's schedule allowed. Then lessons. Sophie had a teaching background and used it, working with Isabelle on reading and basic math disguised as games and stories. Afternoons were for art and music, and the long reading sessions that Isabelle craved. They'd made it through 15 of Maria's books now, Isabelle choosing one each day from the carefully organized shelf. "Today, I want a brave book," she'd announce. Or, "Today feels like a happy book day." Sophie would retrieve whichever book Isabelle selected, and they'd curl up on the couch together, Isabelle's small body pressed against Sophie's side. It felt natural, right, like something Sophie had been preparing for her entire life without knowing it. The problem was Dominic. He was there constantly, even when he wasn't. His presence filled the penthouse, the sound of his voice during business calls in Italian, the scent of his cologne lingering in rooms he'd passed through. The way Isabelle's entire face lit up when he came home each evening, and the way he looked at Sophie when he thought she wasn't watching. She'd catch him sometimes, standing in doorways while she read to Isabelle, his expression unguarded, full of something that made her pulse race, and her professional instincts scream warnings. This was her employer, a dangerous man. Someone whose world she didn't understand and shouldn't want to. But 3 weeks of breakfast conversations and late-night first aid sessions and quiet moments watching his daughter bloom were eroding her carefully maintained boundaries. The crisis came on a Thursday afternoon. Sophie and Isabelle were in the living room, deep into Charlotte's Web, when the elevator chimed unexpectedly. It was barely 2 p.m. Dominic wasn't supposed to be home for hours. He stepped out looking like he'd been through a war. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder, spotted with what looked like blood. His face was bruised, one eye already swelling. "Daddy!" Isabelle scrambled off the couch. "Stay there, Piccola." His voice was rough. "I'm okay. I just need to clean up." But he swayed slightly, catching himself on the wall. Sophie was on her feet immediately. "Isabelle, go to your room and pick out a book for after-dinner story time. Take your time choosing." "But Daddy's hurt." "I'll take care of Daddy, I promise. Go on." Isabelle hesitated, then obeyed, casting worried glances over her shoulder. The moment she was gone, Sophie moved to Dominic's side. "Let me see." "It looks worse than it is." "Dominic, you're bleeding. Let me see." He relented, allowing her to guide him to the couch. Sophie carefully peeled back his torn shirt to reveal a long cut along his ribs. Not deep, but it needed cleaning. "First aid kit," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Bathroom. Under the sink." She retrieved it and returned to find Dominic had removed his shirt entirely. His torso was a map of old scars and new bruises, the body of a man who'd survived things he shouldn't have. Sophie's hand shook slightly as she cleaned the cut, but her voice stayed calm. "What happened?" "Business disagreement." With knives, apparently. The other guy has worse. No pride in his voice, just exhaustion. She applied butterfly bandages to close the cut, her fingers gentle on his bruised skin. This close, she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the way his jaw clenched against pain he refused to show. "You can't keep doing this," she said quietly. "Doing what?" "Coming home like this. Isabelle's going to start having nightmares about losing you too." "I'm careful." "Careful men don't get knife wounds." Sophie met his eyes. "She whispered to me last night that she's scared you won't come home someday. Like Mommy didn't come home." Pain flashed across Dominic's face. "What did you tell her?" "That you always come home. That you promised her you would." Sophie's hand stilled on his ribs. "Don't make me a liar, Dominic." "I won't." "You can't promise that." "No," he admitted. "But I can try like hell to make it true." They were too close. Sophie's hands on his bare skin, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. The professional boundaries she'd been clinging to felt paper-thin. "Sophie." The elevator chimed. Marco stepped out, took in the scene, and his expression darkened. "Boss, we have a problem." Dominic stood immediately, wincing but hiding it well. "What kind of problem?" "The Bianchi family knows about Miss Chen, about her connection to Isabelle." Marco's eyes flicked to Sophie. "They're asking questions." Sophie's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dominic said, his voice gone cold, "that you've become a target." The next hour was a blur of phone calls in Italian, Marco bringing up security feeds on his laptop, Dominic pacing the living room with barely controlled fury. Sophie sat on the couch, trying to process. She'd known abstractly that Dominic's world was dangerous, but knowing and experiencing were different things. "Daddy?" Isabelle appeared at the top of the stairs, book in hand. "Can we have story time now?" Sophie saw Dominic visibly shift, the dangerous man becoming the devoted father in the space of a heartbeat. "Not yet, Piccola. Daddy needs to finish some work. Why don't you show Miss Chen your drawings?" "Okay." But Isabelle's voice was small, uncertain. She came downstairs and curled up next to Sophie, not drawing, just pressed against her side, seeking comfort. Sophie wrapped an arm around her, her own heart racing. An hour later, after Isabelle had finally been coaxed to her room for quiet time, Dominic pulled Sophie into his office. "We need to talk." I gathered. He closed the door, ran a hand through his hair. "The Bianchi family is one of our rivals. They've been testing boundaries for months. Now they've identified you as someone important to me." "Because I take care of Isabelle." "Because you matter to Isabelle. Which means you could be used as leverage against me." Sophie forced herself to breathe. "What do they want?" "Territory. Money. Control. The specifics don't matter." Dominic moved to stand in front of her. "What matters is that you're no longer safe." "So what do we do?" "I increase your security detail. You don't leave this building without armed escort. You don't go anywhere I haven't cleared first." His jaw tightened. "Or you leave. I set you up somewhere safe, far from here, with enough money to start over. No judgment, no hard feelings." Sophie stared at him. "You think I'd leave Isabelle? I think I'm asking you to risk your life for a child who isn't yours." "She feels like mine." The admission came out raw, honest. These past 3 weeks, watching her heal, being the person she runs to with nightmares and questions and joy. Sophie's voice cracked. "I can't walk away from that. Even if staying could get you killed?" "Even then." Dominic closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with emotion. "You're extraordinary. You know that?" "I'm terrified." "Good. Fear keeps you careful." He stepped closer. "But I need you to understand something. If you stay, everything changes. Your freedom, your independence, Your life as you knew it. All of it gets locked down until this threat is neutralized. How long will that take? Days? Weeks? I don't know. His hand came up to cup her face, the touch achingly gentle. I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, but I need you to trust me. Sophie leaned into his palm, letting herself have this one moment of vulnerability. I trust you. You shouldn't, but I do. Something broke in Dominic's careful control. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. Sophie buried her face in his chest, breathing him in, feeling his heart hammer against her cheek. I won't let anything happen to you, he whispered into her hair. I swear it. They stood like that for a long moment, two people clinging to each other in the face of danger neither had asked for. Then Isabelle's voice called from upstairs. Miss Chen, I'm ready for story time now. Reality crashed back. Sophie pulled away, smoothing her hair, trying to compose herself. I should go to her. Sophie. Dominic caught her hand. Thank you. For staying. For being brave enough to choose us. You make it sound noble. I'm just doing what feels right. That's what makes it noble. That evening, after dinner and bath time, after Sophie had read 3 books to Isabelle and tucked her in with extra kisses, she emerged to find the penthouse transformed. 2 additional security personnel stood at strategic points. New cameras had been installed in the hallways. Marco was at the dining table with what looked like shift schedules. Dominic stood at the windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders rigid with tension. Sophie approached quietly. Is all this necessary? Yes. It's going to scare Isabelle. Not as much as losing you would. He turned to face her. I've already lost Maria. I watched grief nearly destroy my daughter. I won't risk it happening again. The rawness in his voice made Sophie's chest ache. Dominic. I need you to know something. He stepped closer. What you've done for Isabelle these past 3 weeks, it's not just helping her heal. You've given her permission to love again, to trust again, to believe that letting someone new into her heart doesn't mean betraying her mother's memory. She did that herself. I just read her some books. You did so much more than that. His hand found hers, fingers lacing together. And somewhere in the process, you did the same thing for me. Sophie's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that when Isabelle whispered that you read stories like Maria did, my heart stopped because I realized something terrifying. His brown eyes held hers. I was falling for you. Falling for the woman who sees my daughter, who doesn't fear my world, who stays even when leaving would be smarter. Dominic, we can't. I know all the reasons we shouldn't. You work for me. My life is dangerous. We've known each other less than a month. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. But none of that changes what I feel. Sophie wanted to be sensible, to maintain boundaries and think about complications and remember that this was her employer and his grieving daughter and a world she didn't understand. Instead, she said, I feel it too. Relief washed over his features, then concern. Which makes this harder. Makes what harder? Keeping you safe. Because now you're not just Isabelle's nanny. You're someone He stopped himself. Someone I care about deeply. The careful phrasing didn't hide what he'd almost said. Someone he loved. So what happens now? Now we're careful. We follow security protocols. We wait for my people to handle the Bianchi situation. His hand tightened on hers. And we see where this goes when the danger passes. And if the danger doesn't pass, then we figure it out together. He pulled her closer. If you're willing. Sophie thought about Isabelle asleep upstairs, about the life she'd built in 3 weeks, about the man in front of her who was dangerous and devoted and desperately trying to protect everyone he loved. I'm willing, she whispered. Dominic's kiss was gentle, reverent, full of promise and fear and hope all tangled together. Sophie melted into it, letting herself have this moment of connection before reality intruded again. When they finally pulled apart, Marco cleared his throat from across the room. "Boss, we have movement. 3 cars just pulled up outside. Bianchi people." Dominic's entire demeanor shifted. The gentleman became the dangerous one in a heartbeat. "Get Isabelle to the safe room, now." Sophie's blood ran cold. "What's happening?" "They're here. They're making a move." Dominic was already moving toward his office. "Marco, secure Sophie and Isabelle. No one gets to them." "Dominic!" He turned back, grabbed her face in both hands, kissed her hard. "Trust me. Stay with Isabelle. Keep her calm. I'll handle this." Then he was gone, and Marco was pulling Sophie toward Isabelle's room. "We need to wake her gently," Marco said. "No panic. We practiced this drill." They had. Sophie hadn't realized it at the time, but Dominic had been preparing for exactly this scenario. Isabelle woke confused but not frightened when Sophie explained they were playing the safe room game Daddy had taught her. "Like hide and seek?" she asked groggily. "Exactly like hide and seek. We're going to be very quiet and very still, okay?" "Okay, Miss Chen." The safe room behind the false wall in Dominic's office was small, but equipped with everything they might need. Water, snacks, blankets, a monitor showing security feeds. Sophie watched the feeds with growing horror as men in dark suits entered the building lobby, as building security tried to stop them. As Dominic appeared in the frame, his expression cold and lethal. "Daddy's going to be okay, right?" Isabelle whispered. "Yes, baby. Daddy always comes home." Sophie prayed she wasn't lying. The confrontation in the lobby lasted 15 minutes. Sophie couldn't hear what was being said, but she watched Dominic face down 6 men without flinching. Watched him make a phone call that brought his own security flooding into the lobby. Watched the Bianchi men reluctantly retreat. When the all-clear came through on Marco's radio, Sophie was shaking. But she kept her voice calm for Isabelle. "Game over. We won." "Did Daddy win too?" "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy won." They emerged from the safe room to find Dominic waiting, his expression thunderous but his eyes soft when they landed on Isabelle. "Piccola, come here." She ran to him, and he swept her up, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. "You did so good, baby. So brave." "Miss Chen was with me. I wasn't scared." Over Isabelle's head, Dominic's eyes met Sophie's. The gratitude there was overwhelming. After Isabelle was settled back in bed, insisting Sophie stay until she fell asleep again, Dominic found Sophie in the kitchen making tea with shaking hands. "It's over," he said quietly. "The immediate threat is over." "What happened?" "They wanted to send a message. I sent one back." His jaw was tight. "They won't bother us again." "How can you be sure?" "Because I made it very clear what would happen if they did." He took the teacup from her trembling hands and set it aside, then pulled her into his arms. "You were perfect. Keeping Isabelle calm, following protocols. Perfect." "I was terrified." "So was I." He pressed his face against her hair. "The thought of them getting to either of you." His voice broke. Sophie held him, this powerful man who'd just faced down armed rivals, but was shaking in her arms because his daughter and the woman he was falling for had been threatened. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're all okay. For now. Then we'll take for now." They stood in the kitchen, holding each other while the city glittered 40 floors below, and Isabelle slept peacefully down the hall, safe because her father had made it so. This was Sophie's life now. Beautiful and terrifying and complicated beyond anything she'd imagined. But when Dominic pulled back to look at her, when he cupped her face and said, "I love you. I know it's too soon and too complicated, but I love you," Sophie found that the fear didn't matter as much as the truth. "I love you too," she whispered. And somewhere in the penthouse, in a room full of carefully color-coded books, Isabelle slept peacefully because the woman who read stories like Mommy did was still there, still staying, still choosing them, danger and all. The bookshelf in Isabelle's room looked different now. Still color-coded, still organized the way Maria had left it, but new books had been added. Books Sophie had chosen, that Isabelle had selected, that Dominic had picked up because they reminded him of his girls. His girls. Sophie stood in front of the shelf, adding the latest edition, a story about a family built from choice rather than blood, when small arms wrapped around her waist. Miss Chen? Sophie had given up correcting Isabelle months ago. She'd tried suggesting Sophie, but Isabelle insisted that Miss Chen felt right. Special. Their own thing. Yes, sweetie? Can I tell you something? Always. Isabelle pulled back to look up at her with those ancient eyes that were finally starting to look young again. I used to be scared that if I loved you, it meant I didn't love Mommy anymore. Sophie's heart clenched. And now? Now I know that's silly. Love doesn't run out. Isabelle's smile was bright and certain. Daddy explained it. He said hearts get bigger to fit more love, not smaller. Your daddy's very wise. He is. Isabelle hugged her again. I love you, Miss Chen. Like family love. Is that okay? Sophie knelt down, eye level with this extraordinary child who'd stolen her heart in a library 3 weeks after they'd met. That's more than okay. I love you too, Isabelle. So much. Good. Isabelle kissed her cheek. Because Daddy's going to ask you to marry him soon. I helped him pick the ring. Sophie's breath caught. What? Oops. That was supposed to be a secret. Isabelle giggled and ran off before Sophie could respond. That evening, after story time and tucking in and whispered, I love yous, Sophie found Dominic on the terrace, staring out at the city. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, and he pulled her around to his front, holding her close. Isabelle told me I'm getting proposed to soon. Dominic groaned. She promised she'd keep it secret. She's 5. Secrets are hard. I had a whole plan. Romantic dinner, meaningful speech about how you've transformed our lives. He pulled back to look at her. Instead, my daughter spoiled the surprise. I don't need romantic dinners or speeches. Sophie's hands found his face. I just need you. Both of you. You have us. For as long as you want us. Forever, then. Forever, Dominic agreed. Then he kissed her. Soft and deep and full of promises about the future they were building together. Inside, Isabelle slept peacefully, surrounded by books that told stories of love and loss and healing. Tomorrow there would be more stories, more laughter, more life. But tonight, on a terrace overlooking Manhattan, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of grief held each other and believed in forevers. Because sometimes the heart stops. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it starts beating again. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.